Hey man, you know what I hate about going to the barber?
What's up?
It's when he tilts my head back to give me that lineup, that good fade,
Yeah.
and he fucking slits my throat. You know
Yeah.
how annoying that is?
I think the more annoying thing is that he identified me as a Rus, even though I am a Polak. It's a
Yeah,
little.
man. Sometimes these foreign barbers just ain't cutting it.
I know, man. I'm not leaving that $3 tip next time.
He said $3 tip. What kind of barber are you going to?
One that kills me.
One that kills you. Welcome, 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 friends, family, and denizens of the internet to the expLOREation podcast. Today, tell me what we're doing today, Greg.
We are going over the movie Eastern Promises.
So this is another movie that's on one of my favorite lists, and I believe this was your first time watching it, right?
You are correct.
And so, as per usual, we're going to go over the plot first, and then we're going to dive into some themes and things of that nature that we found along for our analysis. So, this is a movie about a person named Nikolai and a woman named Anna. And so what happens is that this Anna person is in the hospital one day when a prostitute gives birth to a baby. The mother dies, but the baby lives. So now she's trying to find a suitable home for the baby, and she finds a diary on the prostitute. But the diary is in Russian. She does not speak Russian, and so she tries to figure out what's going on with it. And she goes to a Russian restaurant in London, which is where this movie takes place. And the owner says, yeah, I'll translate it for you, blah, blah. Come back, what's your address? Things of shady nature. So her grandfather, whom lives with her, her uncle actually translates the diary, and we find out that this prostitute was raped and that the baby belongs to some high-up criminal. Now, while this movie is unfolding, we have an A story with Anna and the baby, and we have a B story with our other main character named Nikolai. And so Nikolai is, quote-unquote, just a driver for this mob family that we learn. He is friends, and he works directly under Kiril, which is Semyon's son. Semyon is the man who owns the restaurant, and he could be considered the, quote-unquote, godfather of this movie.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything? I was
No.
just going for big picture stuff here.
Yeah, you're pretty much on point.
If you've seen it, you know what we're going to be talking about. If you have not seen it, my recommendation is to turn this off. We'll be okay with the listens. Turn this off, go watch it, and then come back, because I enjoyed the movie, and I'm pretty sure Greg did too, and we're going to go into some heavy spoiler stuff in this review. So first and foremost, are you ready to talk about it?
Yeah, I'm ready to talk about it.
All right, so we went over the plot. So this is a theme that you found. Talk to me about There's Always a Bigger Fish.
Right. So the theme that there is always a bigger fish kind of ties in with the movie, because you see a lot of struggles between a lot of the mob characters and even some of the innocent civilians that kind of get pulled along with the ride. So you first notice the power struggle between Nikolai and Simeon. So Nikolai is obviously doing odd jobs for Simeon, and he's thinking he's hot stuff. He's taking out people. He understands how to disembody people somehow. Like, you just starts doing it out of nowhere. And he's doing these odd jobs and hits for Simeon. And Simeon thinks he's still the big fish. But then Nikolai starts getting his tattoos, and Nikolai starts kind of ascending up there. And Simeon kind of sees that as a threat somewhat. So then Simeon then orders a hit on Nikolai, which then, everybody thinks he actually dies, but if you've seen the movie, he ends up living. So then
big cat and mouse game.
Big cat and mouse.
And for those of you who haven't seen the movie in a while, or for those of you who haven't seen it at all, the star tattoos on his knee and chest symbolize that you are, quote unquote, a made man.
Yeah.
That you are an officially inducted member of the Mafia.
Yeah.
So we have this big power play between our main character and essentially the antagonist of the whole movie.
Yeah. And then while he was at the bathhouse, the reason he got attacked was because the Chechen brothers thought he was Kiril, which leads us to the next cat and mouse game between Kiril and the Chechens. Kiril gave out a hit to kill Soika, who you see in the movie in the beginning, where he gets his throat slit by the barber, which was one of the brothers of the Chechen group. Azim, who was the barber that was giving the haircut, spearheaded the hit on Kiril for the Chechens. It turns out that Semyon sent Nikolai to the sauna with Azim, who did a bait and switch since the Chechens didn't know who Kiril was. So we can see this kind of power struggle between the Kiril and the Chechens when Kiril went out and did the hit on Soika, and then the Chechens wanted revenge. Then we have Semyon and Tatiana plus Anna's uncle. And you see this is I feel like one of the bigger power struggles, mainly because Semyon is this giant mob head. He is the leader of the Russian mafia in this movie. And Tatiana is just a low-life prostitute, while Anna's uncle is just, I guess he states he's a former KGB agent, which we don't actually know. Now we know the code of his B. But he's just this kind of guy that's living his normal life in London. And these two teamed up because Tatiana died. The baby was delivered in Anna's hospital, and Anna's uncle was then given the diary. This started turning Semyon's life upside down, and this shows that even the innocent that are involved in mafia life can actually do some damage towards the mafiosos, like the head of the mafia. Since at that point, a lot of things started going down, and the police got blood samples from Semyon, and there was a giant heated I guess cat and mouse chase towards Semyon. And then the last Brotherhood, what was this? The last bigger fish kind of example would be Azim's grandson and the Chechen brothers. Because Azim's grandson was the one that killed Soika, and then we have the Chechen brothers who want revenge for that, which in the end, unfortunately, Azim's grandson then dies. Which then leads on into our next theme, which is the son pays for the sins of the fathers.
Right before we hop into that, I want to make a quick comment on the whole there's always a bigger fish thing.
Yeah.
I think you described the situations really well, but the key factor here is no matter in what position of power you are in a complicated gang lifestyle like this, and this is a big theme throughout most gang movies like Casino, Goodfellas, The Departed. I mean, you've seen it done and done before,
Yep.
is that no matter how secure you are feeling, there's always that one person that can fuck you over in the long run.
Yep.
And so it's this kind of false sense of security where, I may be on top currently, but at any given moment, on any given Sunday, you could be bottom of the barrel or sleeping with the fishes, or even both.
Yeah, could be another mob head, or it could be just a plastic bag that somehow forces his way around your face and chokes you.
Excellent. Talk to me about the sins of the father. The sins of the father. The son has to pay for the sins of the father.
Yes. So since we talked about Azim's grandson and the Chechen brothers, we're going to then kind of segue into this. So Azim's grandson and the Chechen brothers. Azim's grandson was not officially inducted as a member of Semyon's organization. The kid was merely following the lead of his grandfather. And so his retribution was dealt with by the Chechens. And then we see that Anna is involved in this grand scheme because her uncle, the only present male in her life at the moment, decides to read and translate the diary. And so because he read and translated the diary, Anna kind of started getting kind of involved in this whole mob situation. She started kind of getting followed. And then, unfortunately, later on in the movie, Semyon ends up hiring a hit for Nikolai to take out Anna's uncle, which that's the son pays for the sins of the father. And then the last one would be Kiril and Simeon, because Kiril is hinted to be a homosexual throughout the film, and this is not an acceptable lifestyle for someone in the mob. In the eyes of Simeon, a homosexual cannot inherit the throne. And so Kiril's punishment is to be trapped inside of this mob's closet. Gabe, you want to kind of go over
absolutely.
this?
So I'm going to touch on this theme
idea?
kind of as a whole. So let's talk about Azim's grandson and the Chechen brothers first.
Yep.
So in the movie, it is stated that Azim's grandson, Ekrem, I believe his name was,
Yep.
is quote-unquote touched by the angels,
Yes.
meaning he is slightly slow, he is mentally retarded, and or autistic in some way, shape, or form, and it kind of shows. And it's a rather unfortunate circumstance that this kid, who his father figure was Azim, who was, I don't know if he was an officially made member, but he was part of that mob lifestyle. Semyon took him in and things of that nature. But it's unfortunate because Ekrem was guilty by association. Ekrem himself did not have anything to do with the mob aside from that particular murder. And even then, Azim stated when Nikolai and Kiril asked, they're like, well, does he know not to tell anybody? And Azim said, this kid won't even remember it. You guys have nothing to worry about. Like, that's how bad his retardation is, or his mental cap is. He was saying that this kid will do you no harm because this is just gone already. This is gone already.
Yep.
And so he was dragged in. He is paying for the sins of Azim, since Azim decided to live this lifestyle.
Yep.
And that's real unfortunate. And then talking about Anna. Okay, so Anna was dragged into this whole thing, and she had many opportunities to get out throughout the first maybe 40 minutes of the movie. The first obvious way out was to not read the diary, not touch it at all, and just go on about her merry way. She's a nurse, and she is clearly lawful good. She's caring and things of that nature, so she wanted to find a home for the baby, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing was for her uncle to not translate the diary. Her uncle is the only quote-unquote male and father figure in her life at the moment. Her boyfriend left her. Her father is nowhere to be found. And so the drunk uncle, takes it upon himself to translate this diary because he knows Russian, and they discover the scary fucking secrets that Semyon raped Tatiana. And so essentially, she's dragged into this big ordeal because her uncle went through it and he read it, and now they're all part of it. So she's paying for the sins of quote unquote her uncle at this point, which is unfortunate. Now, you touched a bit upon Kiril and Semyon, and I think their kind of dynamic in this theme is the most interesting, in my opinion, because throughout the movie, there's themes and hints of like sexual undertones given about Kiril. So the first one we kind of experience is after they kill Soika. Nikolai states that, Soika was talking trash, that this and that, and Semyon asks what he was saying. And he was essentially saying that, Kiril is homosexual, things of that nature.
All that stuff.
He's a drunk, yeah. And so how this plays out, and you touched on it, that Semyon does not want his homosexual son to ascend to the mob throne.
Yeah.
And now another thing that hints at Kiril's homosexuality is the fact that in the diary, Tatiana stated that Kiril could not complete the rape, that Semyon had to step in and do it himself.
Right.
Another small thing, I thought it was kind of interesting to see Kiril forced Nikolai to have sex with one of the prostitutes in that scene.
Yeah, and he watched them.
And he watched him finish.
The whole way.
And so it's kind of just hinted throughout the whole movie, but Kiril is paying on an emotional level because he cannot live as he truly is, or as the movie hints him to be, because his situation with his father, and that's how he's paying for those sins.
And you can kind of see it. He is paying for the sins of his father because his father is a part of this mafia organization, and Kiril really didn't have any other way out because he was born into it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't leave the mob life, as we've learned from all these movies and all these pieces of literature. You don't leave the mob life.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. And so he's stuck in the quote-unquote mob's closet, which is real unfortunate. Moving on to the next theme, the theme of infiltration. So I thought this theme, this kind of came to me in the middle of the night. And I was thinking that infiltration is both a plot theme in this movie, where you have Nikolai is obviously the big twist, where he's not who he says to be. He's actually a cop, or FSB.
Spoiler.
Right, spoiler, okay? You've been warned about 10 minutes ago. So what I liked was that the entire time, the movie framed Nikolai to literally be just a driver. So, this was your first time watching it last week. Did you at any point suspect Nikolai to be like somebody else?
No, I feel like the way he was kind of playing his role and whatnot, he kind of blended in with the mafia lifestyle. The way he dressed, the way he talked, the way he acted, he was a true mafioso to the core.
Yeah,
at least from what I saw.
So I think the director did a phenomenal job of kind of framing Nikolai in this manner where he never seems out of place amongst, the mobsters and Kiril and Semyon. He just feels like a natural addition, and he is just the driver at the end of the day, right? And I think that was intentional because once the twist happens and once you learn that Nikolai is in fact FSB, it's this kind of twist on them and on us at the end of the day because it was infiltrating us. You know what you see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah.
The mobsters didn't know and we didn't know at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of this borderline trust issue that we're having now between the two characters, or the two groups, I should say. Talk to me about Brotherhood, because Brotherhood and Family, you can't talk gangster movie without mentioning these.
Yeah, so like Gabe said, each mafia and gangster movie always has like an underlying theme of brotherhood. And in this case, it was Nikolai and Kiril. Nikolai and since we know that Brotherhood is one of the main mafia themes, Nikolai also knows that Brotherhood is the bigger trait that expels when it comes to the Russian mafia. He built this quote-unquote relationship with Kiril throughout the movie. And to Kiril, this is still a genuine relationship. But at the end of the day, we know, we're in the loop, Kiril's out of the loop, we know that this isn't really that big, like, that it's not a genuine relationship. This relationship is a farce because Nikolai is using Kiril to get himself deeper into the mob so that when the time comes to ice their operations, he would have solidified himself to do the most damage. All because of this quote-unquote relationship with Kiril. So because Nikolai knows that Brotherhood is one of the main traits, he used that towards his advantage to kind of...
He used it as leverage.
Yeah, he used it as leverage to kind of, I guess, plan out and execute his ultimate plan since he is FSB.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So question to you, do you think that this kind of external motivations or ulterior motives affect the validity of their friendship?
Yeah, yeah, because like I
Do you think
said,
so? Because they are still kind of palsy-walsy
yeah,
by the time the movie wraps up.
yeah. So Nikolai and Kiril's friendship, in my opinion, is not a valid one because Nikolai is using Kiril to, like I said, solidify himself into the mob lifestyle. And when the time comes to ice their operation, Nikolai's not going to show any mercy towards Kiril. There's no way there's like any relationship between those two. Maybe towards the end when the whole baby scene happens where Kiril was going to throw the baby into the river, there might have been a slight little buildup of friendship, but I know that Nikolai most likely, at least what from my assumption, is going to just
Okay, here's
throw
my
Kiril under the
counterpoint to you.
bus.
Here's my counterpoint to you.
Yep.
Valid points, very good analysis, but my counterpoint is that Nikolai, in fact, did show a shred of remorse for that prostitute that Kiril forced him to have sex with. You remember? He got her out of there immediately. And he
Right.
did not know her at all.
Right.
So why would he not do the same for somebody that he spent, I don't know, probably months with at this point, maybe even years, right?
Well, look at it this way. The prostitute is innocent. She just kind of got thrown into this
Well,
lifestyle.
prostitution is not legal.
Right, but like she's never killed anyone.
Well,
and I feel like that's
has
a bigger...
Kiril directly killed anyone?
No, but he's hired hits. And I'm sure he has quite the criminal record to kind of back that statement up.
Well, do we know he has a criminal record?
Oh, we don't actually.
We know he has
one hit under his belt.
we know no. We know what he's quote unquote done indirectly as the audience.
Right.
But do we know that the London police know this? Because
Probably
as
not.
far as we understand, Kiril was never particularly under investigation. It's the one Semyon is the one that's under a lot of heat.
Okay.
So, do you still think that, if there's ever a sequel to this movie, that Kiril would not be saved or redeemed in some way or fashion by Nikolai? That he would not spare him?
My answer still says no.
Your answer still says that no?
Yeah.
So, because of
There might be
the ulterior motives in Nikolai's relationship with Kiril, you think this whole thing is null and void? That there is no friendship at the end of the day?
So there might be, obviously putting Kiril under the bus by Nikolai, there might be some sort of like tug or, a hesitation, but I still think at the end of the day, Nikolai is going to throw Kiril in jail or, even worse. That's how I think, that's how I see it.
Okay, so you think that relationships built on
A lie.
some other, I was going to say relationships built on a purpose other than having a friendship or a romantic interest are not true, in essence.
Yes.
Is that what you're going at?
Yes.
Oh, so I'm curious to see where our friendship is headed. If you're going to rat me out for being a crappy podcast host,
You're not a crappy bot. I'll keep you around.
Okay, so yeah, that's kind of an examination about the whole brotherhood aspect.
Yep. Talk to me about your big thing.
Okay, so I want to preface this because we have not been, and we're never going to be a religious podcast, but just stick with this through me, because while watching this movie, we kind of saw and compared and analyzed, and we noticed that some of our characters and cast are similar to characters in the Bible of Christianity, right?
This guy threw so many messages at me about this.
Yeah, so it
It's a
just
big
kind of dawned on me one day. And like I said, just stick with me through this, because it may seem like a long stretch, but sit on it for a couple of days, and I promise it'll make sense.
Buckle your Bibles up.
All right, so in order to set this up, I'm going to go through our cast real quick. So, Nikolai is representative of Jesus Christ. Going down the list, Kiril is representative of the average people or the masses. The baby is the Holy Spirit / Holy Ghost. And then Azim is Judas. So, I don't think Azim needs any explanation. He's the one. He's the one that ratted Jesus out to...
In this case, Kiril.
Not Kiril, the
Nick-
Chechens.
Yeah.
Are you sure we watched the same movie?
Yeah, we did.
He's the one that ratted
Nikolai
Jesus out to the Romans, a.k.a. Nikolai out to the Chechens, right?
Yes.
And so here's kind of where my thought process comes in. So Nikolai is sent to die, right? Jesus is sent to die for the people.
Yes.
Kiril represents the average people, right? He is... so why did Jesus die? Jesus died to show solidarity with humans. And so I think this is perfectly fitting, because Nikolai goes into the sauna with the tattoos on his chest, which Kiril has as a birthright. He is showing solidarity with him, with the people, with the mob. All right? Are we still on the same boat?
Yeah.
So, Viggo Mortensen, a.k.a. Nikolai, my notes are all over the place, excuse me, but he goes into the sauna, essentially a dead man, and he dies as the sun. The sun, the hypostate, right? So the sauna is representative of both Nikolai/Jesus's death and resurrection, because he goes in, and like I said, he goes in a dead man, right? We know what's going to go down, or we have a semblance of what we think is going to go down, and as far as we know, Semyon thinks that Nikolai is dead. He, quote-unquote, died to save Kiril. Jesus died to save the people. And so it wasn't dying in a literal sense. Nikolai is still alive at the end of the movie. But the aggressors, the two Chechen brothers, are no longer around. And the resurrection is that Nikolai comes out on the other side as a made man. He has the stars on his chest, and Jesus ascended into heaven after the third day. And I guess in this instance was after the third fight or whatever. Well, the second fight, because there's only two brothers.
Of the balls.
Yeah, right. But this is what I'm getting at, is that the sun is representative of this symbolic moment in Christianity, the death and the resurrection, and it serves as one. So he goes in as a driver, the driver dies, and he is reborn as a made man in the Russian mafia. And that is where I'm coming from. So the next thing I want to equate, and do not, this is just analysis. I am not being what's the word I'm looking for?
Literal?
I am not, there we go. I am not being literal about this.
This is just 3 a.m. caffeine speak.
Okay, so the church and the mafia lifestyles aren't too far apart, actually. And so this is just comparison for movie's sake, like I said. There is a clear hierarchy in the mafia in this movie, right? You know who's top dog, you know who's right under him. In this instance, it's Semyon, it's his council that we see that gives out the tattoos, and then it's Kiril, and then it's his underdogs, right? In the church, God obviously first, then the Pope, and then the bishops and the I don't know how.
Apostles.
Yeah, sure. I don't know how that order exactly goes, but there is a clearly defined hierarchy from top to bottom, okay?
Yep.
There are a clear set of rules. So the Ten Commandments in regards to Christianity, and then in regards to the mob, the big one is you can never cross the boss. Don't go over his head. Don't do dumb shit. Even Kiril, as Semyon's son, ordered a hit without Semyon's approval, and that got him into all sorts of deep shit. So that was a sin in the mafia standard. All right? Everybody still here? Okay. There is a formal indoctrination, a quote-unquote being made. In regards to Eastern Promises, it's being tattooed. It is the star tattoos on the chest and on the knee. And in regards to Christianity, it is something like a confirmation or a baptism. I'm leaning more towards confirmation because you should be at that stage in your life where you understand what you're getting into, and you kind of agree to this lifestyle. You're making a conscientious decision to that. And I think Nikolai was put in the same spot where he has rejected his father and his mother, and he has accepted the lifestyle of the mobster. All right? And then to wrap this up, any organization that gets big and massive in this instance needs cleansing, right? So no organization is without its bad apples, and much like the church, this particular subset of the mafia needs its cleansing. And I am referring to specifically Semyon being cleansed out as leader, and what we assume is Nikolai or Kiril replacing him in the long run, right? We can only make assumptions at this point because we only have half of the damn story. Anyway, let me wrap this up by talking about the baby a little bit. So when we were coming up with ideas and correlations, the baby was a little bit of trouble, but I think we settled on the Holy Spirit because there's a couple things that stood out to us. So in the Nicene Creed, there's a line called "the Lord, the giver of life," and traditionally babies kind of represent this innocence and this new instance of life, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
And so where we're going from there, I think the baby plays its biggest role in the last 20 minutes of the movie, where Kiril snatches the baby and he's going to, quote unquote, destroy the evidence, right?
Yep.
So the Holy Spirit, the baby, has this power of making people in this instance, Kiril, aka the masses, and Anna believe in Nikolai.
Or AKA the faith.
Yeah,
Like
so
leading towards the faith.
yeah, they make people believe in the mystery of faith, right? And turn to Jesus is what we're getting at. Because at the end of the movie, Anna is no longer scared of Nikolai. Nikolai kind of reveals his secrets. He said, your uncle is A-okay, this and that. And she knows that Jesus, or Nikolai, is a good guy at the end of the movie. And Kiril turns his back to his own father because Nikolai says to him, we don't kill babies. That's not what we do. Like, your dad has gone way too far. And this is perfectly lined up because after Jesus' resurrection, that's when the people really started to notice and they really started to believe. They said, hey, this Jesus, he's something special. And I think this moment when Nikolai stops the murder of that baby is super symbolic in both the Jesus aspect and in the movie aspect. It's kind of a turning point for the masses, for Anna, and people of that nature.
Cool.
All right, you got any closing thoughts on that?
I think you did a phenomenal job with this.
I think we're going to get a lot of hate for that.
Maybe. When you first pitched this idea to me, I thought it was kooky, but when you actually showed me your notes and went through and walked me through it, it was pretty valid points. I'm not going to lie. I can see a lot of the correlations between this stuff.
And, like I said, at the end of the day, we're not theologists.
No.
We're just
no.
we're just some young adults making movie analyses, and that's what we're doing.
Please the listeners.
Please the listeners. All right, so let's get into the back half of these chats. And, I always kind of tell Greg, let's do our analyses first. And then let's talk opinions. So I have an opinion on this movie because I've seen it like 6 times. Probably, if you've been tuning in weekly, you probably know that I'm making this guy watch a lot of my favorite movies, and we're talking about them.
Yep.
Talk to me. What'd you like? What'd you didn't like?
What I liked, for sure, was how the actors played their roles. I think they did a phenomenal job, especially Viggo playing as Nikolai.
Fun fact, he actually speaks like 7 or 8 languages?
I did not know that at all. But yeah, the way they played their roles and, kind of acted throughout the movie, it actually felt like I was in front of, like, in a mafia or mafioso organization. And at the end of the movie, I felt like a total badass. I'm not going to lie. I would have loved to take on some of those stars tattoos, but, I don't really want to get my ass whooped in public.
You don't want to die.
I don't want to die.
Fun little additional fact. I mentioned it to you that when they were filming this in London, Viggo had, the fake tattoos because he didn't really get those things tattooed on him. Yep. Those are like legitimate, like Russian jail tattoos.
Yeah.
And so they went into like a cafe or diner or something, and people like went silent. They were like terrified. They're like, oh shit, like a vor is here, like a Russian mobster is here. And he had to explain to people, like, I'm not a mobster. We're just doing this movie about mobsters. And so he had to kind of calm people down. And I think that goes to show the effect of a marking like that, where, we as the consumer over here on the west side of the world who've probably never seen most of these tattoos before, we're like, oh, wow, that's cool, blah, blah, blah. And it represents this, like, tribe mentality. But it is a real fear over in Europe and Eurasia. It's like a real thing.
Yeah. And then I guess moving into scenes and like all that stuff, and more of my favorites. I like the way they played out a lot of these scenes, especially towards the end with Nikolai and Kiril. I felt the tenseness and kind of the urgency that was going on because I totally thought Kiril would have thrown that baby into the river and Nikolai wouldn't be able to stop him. But so the way they kind of played that out, in my opinion, that kind of kept me on edge. And I always love movies that keep me tense like that. I guess for things that I didn't like about the movie, I don't like how they kind of hinted at a love relationship between Nikolai and Anna at the end, because they kiss at the end, and then literally following right after, Anna is at home with her uncle and whatnot, tending to the baby, and Nikolai is still at the Trans-Siberian Cafe, and there's like literally nothing going on between them. And I guess, it was a cliffhanger, but at the same time, it's like, why even introduce that if you're not going to actually kind of dive deeper into it?
Yeah, well, I guess the plan was to explore that relationship further in the second movie. And it's rather unfortunate that it's been, 12 years now, and we still haven't gotten a sequel.
Yeah.
It's just been kind of hung up, and nobody knows where it's at.
Director boy, whatever your name is, let's get an Eastern Promise 2 cooking. Me and Gabe can star.
Yeah, okay. I enjoyed the movie. I think my first watch, a friend of mine recommended it to me, and he's like, no, you'd like it. And I was like, all right, I'll watch it. And this movie kind of took me by storm. I didn't think I'd enjoy it that much. I do think at times, especially in the beginning, it is a little bit of a slow burn. but the movie takes its paces very carefully to establish all of its characters and establish the relationships, right?
It's like a build up.
Yeah, and it's totally kind of worth that slow burn in the beginning because it only lasts maybe half an hour before you start seeing shit. I think for me, when the movie really started to pick up was probably when he started chopping off that Soika's fingers.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, man, maybe that's like 10 or 15 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it just feels so much longer because you have all this build up, all this setup. You're getting introduced to Semyon and this and that. In addition to that, I really did think that Viggo Mortensen and Vincent Cassel did a fucking phenomenal job. When you put two well-seasoned actors together in a role where they're supposed to be buddy-buddy like this, I think just magic happens. Both these guys did a fucking phenomenal job. And the fact that both these guys can speak Russian as, prior to this film, huge bonus. It felt supernatural. Nothing felt like unorganic or forced or like wonky accents, stuff like that. And I thought their dynamic was so awesome. It was almost like if you took a buddy cop aspect and you completely flipped it on its head and you had this mafioso version of that, and there's like barely any comedy. You know, you have a serious guy and you have a drunk. And I just love their sort of dynamic. I thought
Pinky in the Brain.
Yeah, a little bit like that. I thought casting was great. I didn't think I had an issue with any of the actors. I particularly liked Semyon's actor. He did a fucking great job. And I liked Zim's actor, aside from, kind of our main characters. And I think everybody did a great job.
Yeah.
In regards to the story, man, I love it, but I also hate it because we don't have a solid conclusion.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Those cliffhangers, man.
Yeah, so you got any kind of closing thoughts on this?
Well, at least for those obviously who haven't seen Eastern Promises, like Gabe said, I highly recommend it because this my first time watching. Like I said, it was such an amazing trip, such an amazing movie. Yeah, I have a little bit of dislikes, but I feel like my likes outweigh the dislikes, and I really would like to see a sequel at the end.
Sure. My girlfriend asked me, she's like, well, you always talk about this movie and blah, blah, blah. And like her, in my opinion, on gangster movies, she enjoys gangster movies, but I feel like our favorites are kind of flipped around. So like The Departed is definitely up there for me, and she doesn't seem to like it as much as I do. She thinks it's okay. And she didn't like Eastern Promises as much as I did, right? And so what I'm getting at is that she asked me the other day, she's like, since you always like talk about this movie and since you guys are doing an episode, like, is this one of your favorite movies? And so I kind of decided that this is definitely in my top 10. I don't know if it'll cut the top 5, but it'll be probably pretty close, maybe at number 7 or number 6. So did this break any lists for you? Do you, is this one of your favorite movies, or is this going to be like a one and done for you?
I'm not really that big of a movie guy, but
we'll get you educated.
We'll kind of get me in there. But I would definitely say this is my top 10. I actually really enjoyed this movie. It was pretty
stuff,
up there.
Good stuff.
I
think, oh man, I don't even know. There's so much good stuff going around with this movie, and it's just so, it feels so tightly knit. And at the end of the day, yeah, you have this kind of power struggle, but I think that's what makes this movie so damn beautiful.
There's a lot of dynamics going on that make it good.
It's not even like a power struggle between Kiril, Nikolai, and Semyon, that trifecta, but it's almost this power struggle between the director and the audience. Upon your first time watching, or at least in my first time watching it, it was the director is giving you just enough to live on, just enough information to live on and keep you satisfied for a couple minutes. And then I feel like every half hour is just another bomb drop on top of your head, and you're like, fuck, man, I need more. Yeah. And by the time you're done with it, you're like, wow, that was awesome. Where's the sequel?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things holding this thing back for me. But I also do think that's one of the things that makes this special. There's something alluring about mystery and not having something fully finished.
Yeah, keeps you on the edge of your feet and just wanting more.
Absolutely. So with that, you want to cover anything else in regards to this movie? I think we covered all the big stuff.
I think we did a lot.
Good stuff. So, as per usual, follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you think about this episode. Tweet at us. Leave Facebook comments. Leave comments on Instagram. And then comments on Podbean. Any of those work just fine. If you want us to cover anything that you think we could cover, feel free to email us. Yep. Our lines are open. We do books, movies, music, games.
Anything, really.
Yeah, and anything.
We catches our eye.
Yeah, Catch a Ride, right? We'll do a mini episode on Catch a Ride. But other than that, we got some good stuff coming your way.
Yep. And
be sure to check us out, share out our episodes, and I think that's it. Yeah. You know what to do.
So you know what we do, and we're hoping you do it too. Keep the lore and exploration. Keep the lore and exploration. I almost screwed that up. This has been the expLOREation Podcast.
Thank you.